I promise you, dictators die. Dictatorships die. They do not last forever. They crumble under their own corruption and stupidity. So if you are feeling scared,
Yes.
I assure you, the idiots that we're up against are broken little men. Do you think Elon Musk likes himself? He does not like himself. His own children do not like him. He is a broken human being. He's a master troll doing all this, lashing out for attention. That doesn't make it okay. Obviously, we're not excusing it. But when you think of these monsters, don't think of them as big, scary monsters. Think of them as just broken, fundamentally broken human beings that are miserable with themselves. And they're trying to drag the rest of us down by terrorizing us. They want us to internalize that fear so that we stay home and that we see them, oh, you're such a big man, you're so tough. No, they are not. No, they are not. Because if they're truly comfortable with themselves, they would have the self-confidence and the self-love to build something of value instead of buying their way by throwing their name on Tesla and other things so they can prove to everybody else that they are deserving of love. Our opening clip was my interview Monday night with Jessica Denson on her show Lights On. I'll link to the full discussion in the show notes, which includes ways to resist this evil, even if you're in a so-called red state, otherwise known as a Republican hostage state. Don't lose hope, everybody. That's what they want. We are in a generational battle, but guess what? We've always been in a generational battle. We defeated the genocidal traitors of the Confederacy. We defeated the Nazis in World War II. We defeated Jim Crow. Ignorance and hate, unfortunately, are human, but so is progress, civilization, and working together. That's why if we adopt one issue we care about, one that impacts our lives and communities, and make our phone calls, show up to our local representatives' offices, that surprises the hell out of them. Show up and talk them out of their complacency, and if they refuse to break out of that fog, primary the Democrats who refuse to meet this moment. We need all of that combined to buy valuable time. And I'm going to play a quick clip of AOC, who did a Instagram Live breaking it all down. It's over an hour long. I'll link to it in the show notes. And she points out something that I observed in my 3.5 months or so interning on Capitol Hill for Senator Barbara Boxer of California. There is this oppressive decorum, especially in the Senate, where people abide by these invisible rules that are meant to control opposition and to keep people in their place. I've witnessed this, and AOC brilliantly calls it out in her Instagram Live. Here's a clip.
Democrats in the Senate, in the name of ceremony and fake history, in the case of the filibuster, it's fake history that many of them cite, and what have you, like gentlemen's agreements. The Senate loves their gentlemen's agreement, which is to say it's not like rule breaking, but it's just like these kind of handshake practices that they have. We have to stop playing nice in the Senate and block every damn thing.
Like, we need to be creative now. We need to push boundaries. We need to put the brass knuckles on. And we need to buy time. Delay. Instead, you have so many Democrats voting on this disastrous, dangerous MAGA cabinet that was picked to be the most least qualified extremist people to destroy our very government from within and weaken our global alliances and undo international security, setting off a ricochet effect that's going to create so many disasters around the world and thrust so many already vulnerable people into greater vulnerability. It's bad. Just accept how bad it is now so you can not be as shocked when this all comes to pass. We can sabotage MAGA's violent agenda. We can do this when we can stand a chance for a livable future, not just obviously for ourselves and our families, but the whole world. Commit now to doing something instead of nothing. Choose hope over despair and be defiant in the face of broken little men desperate to scare you. What they fear most is your inner light and your bravery. So unleash your creative potential, find joy in our collective work for shared safety and liberation. We need you now more than ever. We need each other now more than ever. There's so many regular men and women that stood up and did the damn thing in battles like this before us. Many of their names are forgotten, never known in the first place. They don't care. They were just doing the right thing in that moment. Their higher selves showed up. And we are all alive and have enjoyed what freedoms we've had in this country because of them. And now it's our turn to be those superheroes, and that's what we're doing. As you've heard by now, Elon Musk employed a team of Hitler Youth to illegally purge and steal our most vital and sensitive government systems, endangering countless life-saving programs across the country and around the world, hijacking the U.S. Treasury when the U.S. Constitution is clear that Congress holds the power of the purse. Here's Katie Drummond, global editorial director at Wired, speaking with CNN's Aaron Burnett. As you listen, know that one of these creeps is Gavin Krieger. He retweeted multiple Nazi social media accounts, including Nick Fuentes, the infamous neo-Nazi and founder of the Groypers movement, an online network of Nazi trolls weaponized by Fuentes. Under Elon Musk's leadership, Hitler Youth have taken hold of our government. Musk himself proudly performed a Nazi salute twice during Trump's inauguration, and now they're pillaging and destroying and office spacing the whole thing. Here's a clip.
These stories are sort of amazing, and then you're thinking, what world are we living in where you have, an unelected, unconfirmed individual with so much power going into a system with trillions of dollars of payments and other government agencies? You've been focusing on 6 computer engineers. They're all men, and they are young. The youngest is 19.
And Aaron, just to be clear, this is the world we are living in. And Wired has been documenting a few sort of small parts of this world, including, yes, we have identified, and our reporting has identified, 6 young men. All of our reporting indicates they are between the ages of 19 and 24. They are either recent high school or recent college graduates.
High school
graduates in at least one case, all with ties to either Musk-owned companies or Peter Thiel-owned companies. So one is a former Palantir intern, another interned at SpaceX, one is a Thiel fellow, another recently completed a summer internship at Neuralink, which of course is also owned by Elon Musk.
All right, so what are they actually doing, and who's paying them for the work?
Well, it's to be candid, a little bit difficult to ascertain exactly what they are doing. What we do know is they are working across several federal agencies, including DOGE, of course, as well as the Office of Personnel Management, which is essentially the HR function for the government, and the General Services Administration, which oversees things like federal buildings, leases, and then technology and IT. So what we do know is that these young men are working at the behest of Musk and his team that he has brought in across these agencies on a number of engineering-related tasks.
So, okay, Elon Musk wants anyone talking about this, sharing the names of these DOGE employees charged with a crime. Obviously, these are people who are going in and now going to have access to payment systems that affect hundreds of millions of Americans, possibly if you talk about Treasury and certainly federal employees. He's got the backing of the U.S. Trump attorney in Washington, says the FBI and prosecutors are investigating.
Yep.
Has Musk reached out to you or any of his lawyers or anything?
We haven't heard from Musk or his legal team. Obviously, what I would say is that our reporting speaks for itself. It is rigorously reported and fact-checked and vetted by our spectacular legal team. And we look forward to continuing doing the work, trying to figure out exactly what Elon Musk and his team are doing inside of these federal agencies.
And it's important work. It's brave work.
In addition to that, Trump appointed Joe Kent, a young man with ties to neo-Nazi groups, to lead his counter-terrorism division, basically the Gestapo. Kent has appeared on a Nazi YouTube channel, met with, again, Nazi Nick Fuentes, and hired members of groups like the Proud Boys and Patriot Front. Both essentially are Trump stormtroopers that led the violence at Trump's attempted coup of our democracy on January 6th. These are Nazis, America. They're Nazis, and Russia is a fascist, xenophobic terrorist state that openly helped bring Trump to power because this, as we've been warning since the start of the show, is a global war of fascism against democracy. And right now, America is under occupation by Nazis. And Trump just opened up his first concentration camp in Guantanamo Bay. We launched Gaslit Nation years ago with the urgent alarm, "This is a constitutional crisis." That was the headline of our very first episode. It's all coming to pass as we warned. If our institutions and Democrats didn't step up to stop this, what could they have done? A lot, as we've covered on the show for many years, including they could have hired a special prosecutor from day one and gone after the January 6th coup plotters for the 14th Amendment, which bars traitors from holding office. We had a civil war, and because of that civil war, we had laws in place that could have been used to clean house and put in safeguards. And as you're seeing with these executive orders, yes, there is a lot that Biden could have done instead of clinging on to some false mythological sense of normalcy and thinking they could just smile and aviator glasses their way through it. And now here we are. Even if Trump goes away, we're still stuck with overcoming the KKK Nazi culture Trump and the mainstream media normalized. How do we get through this? Number one, accept again that the most shocking crimes and their consequences are yet to come. Prepare yourself for 9/11 level events so you're as emotionally prepared as possible, not demoralized and terrorized, because that's what they want. How do we know that's coming? This week's guests are the brilliant filmmakers behind the must-watch true crime documentary, The Bibi Files, which takes us behind the scenes of Israel's investigation into the massive corruption of wannabe strongman Benjamin Netanyahu and his equally corrupt wife, Sara. As Gaslit Nation has long warned, before October 7th, Netanyahu was looking for a war to cling to power. Now he's in Washington, D.C., trying to convince his ally Trump to let his war keep going. Why? Because as soon as the war is over, he faces corruption charges and prison time. And also, Israel will investigate the security failures on his watch that led to October 7th, the worst loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. As this great film, The Bibi Files, shows you, Netanyahu's own corruption and schemes to cling to power laid the groundwork for the Hamas attack on October 7th by literally ensuring the transfer of financial support to Hamas. It's all there in the Bibi Files. Why? To sideline moderate Palestinian leadership, undermine the two-state solution, and avoid peace between Palestinians and Israelis, thereby perpetuating the cycles of violence and trauma. It's horrific. You hear me talk about this on the show, but when you see it from these extraordinary hours of leaked footage that have come together in the Bibi Files, it is jaw-dropping. You need to see this film. The Bibi Files is based on hours of leaked footage of the Netanyahu corruption investigation and includes Israeli prosecutors interviewing him and his allies, like major Trump supporter Miriam Edelson. She was responsible for one of the dumbest trades in NBA history when, as co-owner of the Dallas Mavericks, she traded once-in-a-generation talent, Luka Doncic, to the LA Lakers in exchange for Anthony Davis and a 2029 first-round pick, shocking the sports world with how ridiculous the trade was. I'll link to an actual sports analyst for the full breakdown, as I have zero interest beyond the fact that it highlights the sheer idiocy of Miriam Edelson, as emphasized in the Bibi Files. If you want to see where America is headed, watch the Bibi Files. The greatest threat to Israeli democracy, as well as peace for both Palestinians and Israelis, continues to be Bibi Netanyahu and his wife, Sara. Future historians will look back on America's constitutional crisis and our struggle against dictatorship and see Netanyahu as a central figure in the transnational crime syndicate that helped bring Trump back to power. Netanyahu knew his war with Hamas would keep him in power. He promised a long war. He's still trying to keep this war going despite the ceasefire. He carried out war crimes against Palestinians, knowing it would drive a wedge between Trump's opposition, given that Biden is a staunch Zionist. Many Americans fell for it, voting against their own interests or abstaining from voting in the 2024 election, helping bring Trump back to power. Now Trump wants to continue Netanyahu's ethnic cleansing, turning Gaza into beachfront property, just like his son-in-law Jared Kushner wanted. The coup destroying America did not happen overnight. It's been 40 years in the making. We documented it for years on Gaslit Nation, and you can find a playlist of those episodes on our YouTube homepage. The far right needed 40 years to get us to this crisis point, which is why voting for the lesser evil was always the morally correct and urgent strategy to dig ourselves out of this crisis. Those on the left who didn't understand that got played by Netanyahu, by Trump, by Russian disinformation, by bot farms. You got played. Voting for the lesser evil sucks, but it matters. Oh, it matters. And now many are finally seeing why. I have no doubt that those who convinced themselves they were noble are now scared out of their minds. Those who try to convince you that Biden and Trump are the same are now scared out of their minds. Trump just sent the first plane of human beings to his concentration camp at Guantanamo Bay. No oversight, only cruelty. As I've long warned, this is going to be a magnet for sadists and sexual abuse, including of children, and our tax dollars are paying for it, all because some idiots on the left didn't grasp that we didn't get here overnight. This has been a 40-year coup, and we won't get out of it overnight. Voting for the lesser evil wasn't a feel-good exercise. It was a strategic moral imperative. They convinced themselves it was fashionable not to vote for Jill Stein, and to spread that disinformation on their platforms, abusing the trust of their own Substack audiences. And now, like many MAGA voters, they'll be forced to wake up to what they've done. They got played, they played themselves, and yes, the Democratic Party establishment sucks, but that too won't change overnight. The strategy was always vote for the lesser evil, primary the hell out of worthless Dems, and strengthen progressive grassroots infrastructure in the all-important state level, because the only way we get out of this crisis is through building political power. Political power is non-negotiable. More on that in future episodes, as we have some big races this year. The ones who are terrorizing us, they have political power. So we need to chip away at that and build our own. And yes, part of that strategy requires voting for the lesser evil, because we did not get into this tragedy overnight. It's been 40 years in the making. The far right had a long game. The Democrats did not. The Democrats did not. And now here we are. For now, here to help us make sense of where America is headed, using the example of Netanyahu and his wife Sara's corruption, is Alexis Bloom, director of the Bibi Files, and producer Alex Gibney, who is also working on a documentary on Luigi Mangione and the corruption of the healthcare industry. I'll drop a link of where you can watch the Bibi Files in the show notes. So many questions for you both. How did you get this footage, and why do you think it was sent to you?
I got the footage, and I got a message on Signal one day saying, would you be interested in some footage about Netanyahu? It was pretty vague. I get a lot of messages on Signal offering me stuff, and often the stuff is sketchy at best, but sometimes it's for real. And so I pulled on the thread, engaged with a source who told me that in their possession was hundreds of hours of police interrogation videos involving the Netanyahu corruption case. Would I be interested? Yes. I then proceeded and got them. I downloaded them and then realized I needed to figure out somebody who could really tell me with some level of detail what was going on in them. I don't speak Hebrew. And while I was familiar with the corruption case, I wasn't that deeply familiar with it. So I engaged with a journalist who became a co-producer on the project, Raviv Drucker, who is an expert in this particular case, but also in corruption in Israel. And then, once having been convinced by Raviv how valuable this material was, I thought we must get a great director. And the first person I thought of was Alexis. And Alexis and I had worked together before. She had produced a film I did called We Steal Secrets about Julian Assange. And then I had produced a film that she had directed about Roger Ailes called Divide and Conquer. And Alexis has great experience as a cinematographer, and also as a wonderful documentarian who had released also this year a film about Anita Pallenberg, which is an absolutely gorgeous film. So I felt Alexis would have the chops, the skill, and also the interest to do it. And luckily for me, she said yes.
Lucky me.
Yes, lucky all of us, because this film, it just has to exist, and it's so powerful and chilling. How did you feel when you received all this footage, and why was this sent to you? Like, spoiler alert for everyone listening, watching this crime, Netanyahu clinging to power all these years, it's very clear whoever sent this to you was trying to force some sort of justice, because you have a criminal at the helm of Israel, just like we have here in the United States. And as one DOJ prosecutor said to me, in the US, our system's not designed to have a criminal in charge of it. And that's what's happened to Israel. And so it's very clear that this was all sent to you to force finally some justice accountability just through public awareness. Is that what you were feeling when you received this?
It's what I felt. Mind you, this was before 10/7. This was when Israel was racked by the Confederation over Netanyahu's attempts to undermine the judiciary. But I think what was really compelling to me about it was the idea of this rigorously stage-managed character who, despite his actions, had managed to present himself as a kind of grand international statesman, seeing the kind of venal, petty manner in which he operates on a day-to-day basis, which is normally not available to us. Not only that, but seeing his wife, his son, and all the other people involved in this corruption case. So it was really like that Wizard of Oz moment when Toto pulls back the curtain and you see the guy operating the levers as opposed to the great and magnificent Oz.
Netanyahu is just such a master manipulator, isn't he, Alexis? And the way you present him is just, he's so calm and cool, and that's part of his manipulation.
It is. I mean, it's something he's cultivated, he's practiced. He's Israel's longest serving prime minister. And even at the beginning of his career, he practiced. He got tapes, American coaching dialect tapes, and kind of public speaking tapes, and, learned to gesticulate with his right hand because he's a left-hander, and he read that people feel more at ease watching people who gesticulate with their right hand because it's dominant in our culture. So he's supremely aware of how he's coming across. And I think at this stage of his career, he's very comfortable in that manipulation space. As his friend Uzi Bella says, he lies left and right, and he doesn't even know when he's lying. And his head of communication, Nir Hefetz, who we also speak to, said that too. I mean, actually, every single person I spoke to who knows him, who's worked with him, either on the record or off the record, said he lies. There was not a single person I ever spoke to who said he didn't. Now, there are probably some who would say he lies in the service of a greater goal, Israel's security. But I would say that's a slippery slope. Once you start justifying it, you're in a tenuous position where the means always justify the end.
The police call it noble cause corruption.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Noble cause corruption is somebody who, because they allegedly in pursuit of a noble cause, you're permitted to do nasty things. And the reason the police have a phrase about it is it's the classic example of the detective who can't get the mobster living in a neighborhood, so they plant drugs on him. But very quickly, that kind of corruption escalates over time, where now you're doing dirty deals. Now you're running drugs. Now you're doing all this stuff with the belief that somehow you're invested in a noble cause when you become utterly corrupt.
I mean, that's good Richard Nixon line, right? It's like when the president does it, it's not illegal.
I felt like I was watching Nixon in your film, Viktor Yanukovych, Trump and the Trump family. It's just this strong man type that's just defiant and shameless, just no shame. Why do you think other ministers in Israel's government, other officials, have stepped down, have gone to prison for corruption, for bribery, but Netanyahu has been able to cling on this whole time?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that other politicians stepped down because they respected the rule of law, just on a simple sense. Ehud Olmert stepped down, who we interview in the film, because he realized he was being investigated. He was about to be indicted. And he said, I'm going to respect this investigation. I'm going to step down from my position and I'm going to fight it. He ended up going to jail, but everyone else sort of respected that if the police investigate you for X number of years, 2 years, 4 years, and then they came up with an indictment, that there was sufficient cause for there at least to be a trial, except for Netanyahu, who believes that he's bigger than the state. And I think that hubris of I am the state, I am bigger than the state, also breeds a kind of this big power magnet, basically, that he has sort of sucked up other politicians into it. Now, most of the people around him are chosen on the basis of loyalty. I wouldn't say they're towering intellectuals or particularly experienced in their jobs. I mean, that's when you speak to Israelis, they all despair. Like the Minister of Education said he doesn't read books. You know, those are the things that really bother them. But when you sort of bloviate to that extent and you go on and on about the deep state and how everyone's out to get you and everything, and you've selected all these loyalists, then they sort of stay with you. So we've seen him bring out, I would say, the worst in everybody around him. And he's enabled a lot of very extreme people.
Yeah, I think there is a sense with politicians who do reckon with a moment where they have done something embarrassing and they choose to step down, like Olmert did. You know, there is some understanding of the common weal, the idea that they're part of a society that has norms and rules and reckoning. But when it comes to Netanyahu, the personal is the political is the personal. There's only what satisfies him personally in terms of his own ambition. And I would say the same thing is true for Trump, though it's probably, for Trump, it has more to do with personal enrichment. But nevertheless, it's all about them. Everything else is secondary.
Your film shows this House of Cards crime scene through the leaked footage you received of these police interrogations. And you see the best of Israel versus the worst of Israel. You see the men and women in the streets in Israel's largest protests leading up to, this was, of course, before October 7th. You see these men and women, prosecutors, law enforcement, just trying to get the truth out of the Netanyahus and all of their accomplices in this massive bribery scheme of just a flow of champagne and jewelry and presents. So it's such a flow of bribes that they had code names. It was just astonishing to watch. And so it's very, very clear about your film is that Netanyahu is so smug in outsmarting everybody and staying in power. And he tried to get the Supreme Court. You show it in your film. And when that didn't work, he was funding Hamas, getting Qatar to fund Hamas, sidelining the moderate Palestinians. And now he has his forever war. My first question to you is on this topic, and then I have a follow-up having to do with the US. My first question is, do you have faith that the ceasefire is going to hold, given that your film makes it clear that he still faces a criminal prosecution? He still faces prison. So do you have faith in the ceasefire? And my second question is, your film showed Trump. Is Trump going to lead us into war? Is Trump going to make America vulnerable for some sort of attack, just like Netanyahu made Israel vulnerable?
There is technically a ceasefire with Gaza, but just as the ceasefire was declared with Gaza, he opened a front in the West Bank. So there really hasn't been a ceasefire. One of the largest military operations has literally just been, it's almost like the price of the ceasefire in Gaza was that there was going to be an invasion in the West Bank. So there isn't a ceasefire. I don't know whether it will hold in Gaza. I would say probably not. I think the chances are small, but the war continues, whether it's in the West Bank or whether it'll be in Syria, or he's going to propagate constant instability and a constant need for him to be front and center saying, I am Mr. Security and I will save you from this. In terms of Trump and a war, I with relish, I leave that to Alex.
Your next film, unfortunately.
I have no idea. I mean, the truth is, Trump says a lot of things. Some of them, he follows through on, some of them he doesn't. What is disconcerting, though, is that he's arming his cabinet with people whose only criterion for the jobs they seem to be about to occupy is personal loyalty to Trump. And that's a kind of a terrifying thing. It's very much of a mob boss mentality. So it's not expertise we're getting personal loyalty to Trump. And that's not a very good thing when you're starting to think about national security for the nation.
I mean, I think the idea, whether he declares war on Greenland or Mexico or wherever it is one thing. But the idea of having an enemy, you got to have an enemy. Trump will have an enemy. So whether it's Greenland or immigrants or trans people or whoever it is, it'll be a rotating cast. But like Netanyahu, he does need an enemy.
He understands hate better than most human beings. He understands what a delicious narcotic hate can be. And so he finds ways to focus people on hatred rather than doing anything particularly constructive.
It's very clear that this war cannot end because Netanyahu has promised a long war. He said, maybe 10 years. And he has also said there can't be an investigation on the security failures that led to October 7th because that would investigate him.
Mm-hmm.
And so what efforts are you aware of the Israeli civil society to try to get him out finally?
There's got to be an election. There are already people who are trying to gather evidence about October 7th and prepare for an accounting of why it happened. We know that because Netanyahu's people have already been accused of shredding documents. So we know that. So there are people sort of trying to do that. There's so many things that could potentially push him out. There's a huge issue of who serves in the military and whether the Orthodox will ever serve in the military. And that could be something. At one point, I thought, oh my God, that's going to be the thing that topples him. Because when you say a forever war, that's a lot of Israelis going into the army. I don't think 10 years of that without the Orthodox serving is gonna fly. But I think they'll have to agree to do it. If it's 10 years of war, I think the Orthodox will have to serve.
The little moments in your film that spoke volumes, you end with Netanyahu shredding papers. There's a subtle moment, I don't know if this was intentional, but it really irritated me, where he's coughing in front of his investigators and doesn't even bother to cover his mouth. And I was like, what an asshole. But the other villain of this film is Sara Netanyahu. My God, she is terrifying. The champagne queen. And could you speak a little bit about her and the influence that she has had on the rise of Netanyahu and his clinging to power?
She's a fantastic character, just as far as a character study goes, if she was fictional, but she's real life. And so whatever we find amusing or compelling about her is actually dangerous in real life. She has his ear, she knows his schedule. She's the expert in who can we trust, who's loyal. She has a degree in psychology. So she says to Benjamin, you're the cerebral history expert and I'm the mental psychology expert and I know who we can trust. So we wouldn't have put her in the film had she not been important politically. But she is a very complicated figure. Everyone says she's an alcoholic. If the pink champagne invoices are anything to go by, and he doesn't drink. So there's only, who else in the house is drinking them? She consumes a vast amount of alcohol, put it that way. She's important. She's she's there, she's aggressive, and they're codependent. So part of the work of the film was to try and take it away from this singular biopic. And I think, people tend to write, whether it's books or films about like Churchill, and then they go Putin, and there are always people around them. So I find it interesting to see who the people are around them. And, sometimes it's a wife.
It's sort of suggested in the film, but not entirely explicated because the proof isn't there. But it's said by a lot of people in Israel that Netanyahu was offered a deal, a plea deal, basically, but wouldn't take it, or did take it, but then undid it once Sara heard that he had taken it, because she couldn't abide the idea that he would have to stay out of politics, and therefore her perch atop Israeli society would be lost. The other thing a moment that I find particularly nauseating in the film, not against the film, but what it reveals, is the moment when the families of the hostages have to bow and scrape before Sara Netanyahu and flatter her, just so they can hope that she and her husband don't turn their back on them, which to me is the grossest kind of personal venality for a politician.
It's so authoritarian. And then the other very disturbing parts came from their offspring, who, like Murdoch's kid, is worse than Murdoch, more far right than Murdoch. He's like the Don Jr. of the Netanyahus. Could you speak a little bit about Yair Netanyahu, what his role is in this whole operation?
I mean, for a while, Yair was very important. I don't know about today. I think, honestly, Benjamin has realized that he's a bit of a liability. So he's not as important today as he was then. But he was living at home with his parents, online all day, every day, and advising his father on what to do online. Also watching for criticism. And it's through, of online criticism, through Yair, the Netanyahus got involved in Walla, that website. And so unfortunately, Yair was a big part of that case. I think that he pulled the family down into that by becoming kind of monomaniacal about how his family was being covered and encouraging them to sort of take over the website because they knew the owner. So he was like, why are Walla writing about us like this? We know Shaul Elevich and we know how to fix this, and the owner is right wing and it's wrong. And they knew that Shaul Elevich also was very badly in debt. So Yair has gotten his father into trouble before, but Benjamin doesn't have a cell phone and doesn't read online. So he relied on Yair for a lot. And in his big election of 2015, a lot of people said it was because he went online, he went on Facebook to say the Arabs are being bussed to the polls in droves. If you want Israel for Israelis, you better vote for me. And he did that on a live Facebook feed. And apparently it was instrumental in getting the vote out. And that was all Yair's idea. So Yair has been a blessing at times, and smart and savvy. And he's been probably a bit of a curse too. Since the war started, he hasn't been around. He went to Miami, which was odd. Most of the kids that age were called up and had to volunteer, even if it's like food distribution or something. And Yair was in a very expensive apartment building in Miami throughout. So I don't know, at great expense to the taxpayer. He has a lot of security, but so I don't know why Benjamin sort of siloed him there. There's a lot of rumors about how crazy he is. There's a big rumor in Israel that he tried to hit his father. It's a rumor, I'll say, but I've heard it from probably a dozen people, unconnected. So I don't know, something big happened there, and zoops, he went to Miami.
And that moment in the documentary where it was revealed that Netanyahu would like his son to take over from him, as though this is a dynasty of royalty. And that's how they've captured Israel. It's like they see themselves as this royal family that's entitled to all these extremely expensive gifts. And the story, the Walla website you mentioned, for our listeners who haven't seen this, the Bibi Files yet, they must have watch parties. The Walla website is owned by a friend of the Netanyahus who desperately needed money. The Netanyahus hooked him up with money in exchange for the Walla website, which has a predominantly young audience, running all of this pro-Netanyahu coverage, only flattering pictures of Sara Netanyahu, and on that list goes. And that was one of the big scandals that exposed him to a legal liability, which he's dragging out. And no surprise that Sara is a nightmare to work for. That was brilliantly shown. What didn't make it into the film? Because I can't even imagine like the stuff that you had to debate over.
Oh, loads. I mean, that housekeeper had a lot more to say. You know, incidences of like Sara throwing things and breaking things at home, and Benjamin having to carry her upstairs and put her to bed and stuff. But it just seemed to be too much of a focus puller. There's a lot of entertaining stuff like that, but it's really about waging the war. So we didn't want to get pulled down this other rabbit hole of just disliking them so much, which you could do. But it's not really about that. It's about him and his alliance with the extreme right wing and the way they wage war. So we had to lose a lot of stuff about Sara, a lot of stuff about Yair. We had a great scene that we shot in a cigar shop, which was amazing, about these two cigar guys who sell cigars in Tel Aviv, explaining how expensive Netanyahu's cigars are. And how they're saying it's top of the range. We don't even sell them normally here. I can't afford them. A lot of other sort of fun stuff that wasn't absolutely intrinsic to the storytelling, but it's already a long film. So we had, serious business of the war in Gaza to get to.
And in terms of the Netanyahu's net worth, is it fair to say that they're oligarchs? They certainly enjoy an oligarch lifestyle as much as they try to hide it. Do you have an idea of what their net worth might be? After his 20 years of public service.
I don't think they're oligarchs. I mean, who the hell knows? Do they have money squirreled away in Panama? People talk about that. We don't know. That's the truth. We don't know. What they display is not an oligarch's lifestyle. They don't have a private plane. They have a very nice, big, flash weekend house with a swimming pool. Actually, I would say they're probably not. If you were an oligarch, you wouldn't need to rely on other people to give you champagne and cigars. I think that's almost like they want to be, but they're not.
Did you come across the Kushners in your research? They're old family friends. Like Netanyahu used to stay at Jared's house when he was coming to the U.S. Did that pop up in any of your research?
It didn't. Not to do with the corruption trials, no.
What response have you had to this film from Israel?
Well, it's been, we had to make an agreement as part of making the film. Part of my deal with the source was that we wouldn't cause the film to be released in Israel because the source could go to jail. The police interrogation videos run afoul of a privacy law in Israel where you're not allowed to be videotaped as part of an official proceeding and have that be broadcast without your permission. So we had to agree not to distribute it there. That said, ever since the film was released, it's been pirated massively there. And I think, some people had told us people aren't going to be that interested in this in Israel. They know it all. Well, that hasn't turned out to be true at all. I think that the hunger to see this behind the scenes material of these characters who so carefully cultivate their image was and continues to be like catnip.
No, absolutely. And question about the security measures that you have to take to protect your sources. We're entering this even darker time where you have mainstream media bending the knee to the Trump administration. Disney paid that $15 million in a case that they could have fought and potentially won. So it's a very chilling time of self-censorship and conformity. And that means independent media, independent filmmakers like yourselves are crucially more important. What sort of measures do you take to handle sensitive material? You mentioned people reach out to you on Signal, but then you download this material. How do you know you're not downloading spyware? Like, how do you protect yourselves and protect your sources, especially in this climate?
We try to take informed risks. We examine material. We have a reasonably good IT department. We consult with people who are very, very good on this stuff. We do the best we can. That doesn't mean that ultimately we're not vulnerable. We all are. And we do keep our eyes open.
From a filmmaking standpoint, you deal with such heavy topics, and the way you release this information, it's hypnotic. It pulls you in. What were your creative influences, Alexis, on this? Because some of the scenes were just absolutely captivating, the way you presented them.
Gosh, that's a very good question. I mean, I can't think of a specific film that influenced me. I mean, you watch a lot of films and you know what works and what doesn't. So a slow build is always great, I find. Humor is always great. I love Alex's film. I think Alex was one of the first people to show you that serious journalism can be entertaining as well. The Navalny film was fantastic, very serious, very entertaining. There's a lot of good journalism out there that is fact-checked and rigorous and not boring. So I think you just want to be on that side of the mark if you're going to ask people to spend almost 2 hours of their time today watching a film. It can't be boring, it can't feel like eating your, vitamins kind of thing, your spinach. And that requires money, and it requires distribution, and it requires a great editor. Andy Grieve edited this film. He was fantastic. He's also edits a lot of Alex's films. Halil Efrat also edited it. You just got to have a really great team who are really dedicated. And I think if you're lucky enough to have that's half the battle.
I mean, that's the defense in this time, is to tell great stories. And those great stories will ultimately find a way. Because there are tremendous hindrances to distribution of this kind of serious material. We learned not too long ago, just after Mark Zuckerberg made his famous statement about how now he was going to be so much more free speech, that they were banning our ads on Meta. We couldn't get them through. So that gives you some sense of how hard it is to get this kind of content out, even though people really, really, really want to see it.
Yeah, and even though it's on the front page every day, Israel, it's not something people are unfamiliar with. It's a daily discussion anyway.
You lay it all out there perfectly. Like, there have to be watch parties. Are you doing any grassroots campaigning around this? I know you got on the Oscar shortlist, which I'm so happy about. And what is the future life of this film? Because obviously this was a core issue of the 2024 election. It likely is what we're seeing so far, that it contributed to why Kamala Harris lost such a close election. Biden's policy, obviously, towards Israel and Gaza. So what is the future of this film? I mean, this is something that has to wake people up. As I've been saying on Gaslit Nation, if you care about Israel, if you care about democracy, the future of Israel, you have to hold Netanyahu accountable. And it's still such a divisive issue, just having these conversations. So what do you see as the future of the film and sort of working with the grassroots that's so engaged now around these issues?
It's streaming. It's available to see at jolt.film for $12, so anyone can watch it. We're doing festivals. We're taking it around the world. We're doing screenings, private screenings with sort of community groups and stuff. But, I don't know, it's up to, I think once it develops a momentum, it'll build and it'll build and it'll build. If you have a big streamer on your side, they spend a lot of money up front and they make a big splash. And we didn't have the resources to do that. So it's a slower build and it's word of mouth. And we're there's people who write to me every day wanting to see it. Where can I see it? So we're just sort of keeping up the drumbeat, basically.
You should screen it at the International Criminal Court.
Good idea.
So I want to ask you about the times we live in. Are you surprised that we are here? I mean, you've, Alex, obviously all your work sort of warning that things are headed here. Are you surprised now in this moment?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that we're here. I'm a little bit surprised that we've reached such a level of what I would call post-truth, that folks like Netanyahu and Trump have managed to invest so much in monetizing vitriol that they create a kind of tribalist politics that is really, really, really taking us in a terrible direction. But the biggest concern for me is this willingness to disbelieve. We're living in a moment now where everything that Orwell warned us about as he was observing the Soviet Union is now coming true, but in a kind of proto-capitalist authoritarian manner. And yeah, it's surprising to me and deeply concerning.
Yeah.
I hate to talk about myself, but you two are some of my heroes, so I have to tell you, I made a movie that features George Orwell as a character.
You did? Good.
Yes, it's called Mr. Jones. It is the story of the young Welsh journalist who risked his life and career to expose Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine. The Welsh journalist was beautifully played by James Norton.
Uh-huh.
And Joseph Mawle plays George Orwell, who's writing the words of Animal Farm that narrate this young man's story to get the truth out in the world. And it was directed by Agnieszka Holland. And I'm going to send her a link to your film because she has to watch this as well.
She's a great director. I didn't know she would produce that. Anyway, that's really exciting.
Yeah, I wrote and produced it. And one of my very first works as a journalist, printed works in this alternative weekly in Portland, Oregon, was a review of your film, Enron, the smartest guys in the room. And I'm very happy to say it was a glowing review. I'll link to it. And it is what set me on my course of saying, oh, wow, things are really corrupt out there. So I better have a podcast one day fighting all that corruption. So I just want to say, like, Alex, you planted so many seeds, so much inspiration of so many folks out there. You've probably given birth to like countless projects of people following in your footsteps. What a nice thing.
Pay it forward.
Yeah, we always try to. So I wanted just to close off by saying, as dark as things are, and given that you both have such a close lens on the darkness out there to bring light to it, what is giving you hope right now for humanity in this moment of time, if anything?
There's that line from Dostoevsky, the darker the night, the brighter the stars. And I do see, particularly in the non-mainstream journalistic outlets, a lot of powerful investigative reporting, which is really, really impressive to me, considering the constraints that they're under. But young people working very hard to do tremendously inspiring work. So yeah, that stuff really gives me a lot of hope.
There was a priest today who gave that sermon.
Oh, the bishop.
Yeah, the bishop.
Yeah.
She gives me hope. That was fantastic. Just quietly, Marianne Edgar. There you go. Marianne Edgar gives me hope that she would just quietly stand up there in front of them all and call truth to power in a beautiful, restrained, and dignified way. I was like, that's got to happen all the time. We got to make that happen.
Yeah, speak the truth.
Yeah.
Alexis, what are some projects that you're working on that we could track and have you back on the show to discuss?
I have just finished this and I am taking a break.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And Alex, I read that you are working on a documentary about the internet's boyfriend, Luigi Mangione.
Yeah, I'm producing it. I'm not directing it, but yes, we're working on it. Obviously, it's about him, but it's also about the company of his victim. It gets into that territory.
A crime conspiracy by United Healthcare.
Right.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So we'll be watching that as well. Well, thank you both so very much. Everyone go see the Bibi Files. It lays it all out there, and have watch parties. Tell your friends. It's an exceptional, powerful film. And it also shows the danger that we are in here at home in America if we don't stand on our truth and fight back.
Great. Thank you so much.
Want to join the conversation? Shape the show by becoming a member of Gaslit Nation on Patreon. Join our community of listeners for exclusive Q&A sessions, bonus shows, get all episodes ad-free, invites to live events, and more. Most importantly, connect with other listeners in our group chat and committees, planting seeds of change. Sign up at patreon.com/gaslit. Gaslit Nation hosts Resilience Political Salons every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Can't make it live? Recordings are available to our community on Patreon. Salons are your space to vent, ask questions, and connect with other listeners. who also really hate Nazis. To help Ukraine with urgently needed humanitarian aid, join me in donating to Razom for Ukraine at razomforukraine.org. To help refugees in conflict zones, donate to Doctors Without Borders at doctorswithoutborders.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Andrea Chalupa. Our editing wizard is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smythe of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Work for Better, Prep for Trouble, Abby Zavos, Lily Wachowski, TBL 92666, Sherry Escobar, Sydney Davies, John Schoenthaler. Ice Bear is defiant. Yes, we are. Larry Gassan, Ann Bertino, David East, Mark, Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, Kevin Gannon, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, James D. Leonard, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Abby Rode, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Mark, Sarah Gray, Leah Campbell, Jared Lombardo, Ann Marshall, and Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all for your support of the show. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.